We now know how to do some front-end web development that's talking to the front end and the back end, right? We're listening for events. When those events are fired, we talk to the back end. We say, hey, some CRUD action needs to be performed on our database. And then when that's done, we then update the front end corresponding. So far, our back end has been that JSON server that was connected to a JSON file. All we're going to do today is we're just going to swap that JSON server out for one of our Rails servers, and we're going to swap out the book.json file with an actual SQLite free database. So we're basically just going to, almost the exact same backend we built last mod, we're just going to slot that in place of that JSON server, but we're going to have a slightly different variant, which you can probably guess based on the name of today's lecture. So we're going to make a new Rails app. So what we're going to do, I forgot what my example was, blog. We'll make a blog. So I'll say Rails new blog, but when we create it, we're going to include this flag that says API, okay? Because what we're going to create, is basically going to be the same as the JSON server we've been using, because we want to do something different. What the APIs do, as opposed to so if we just, as opposed to like a regular web app, the kinds of web apps you built in mod 2. So our API is still going to have all 7 RESTful routes, but APIs do something a little bit different.
Respond in JSON.
Yeah, APIs respond with raw data. In our case, it's going to be JSON. 90% of the time, it's going to be JSON. Yeah. So what you did in mod 2, right? We had all 7 RESTful routes, but if we said, "Let me see the index," we actually gave them some HTML back, right? We said, right, you've asked to see the index route, you've asked to see all of the books or something. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to go to my database, I'm going to get all the books, I'll put them in a nice HTML file with some styling and stuff, and I'll send that back to you. API just gives you back the data, right? So that's what our JSON server was doing, right? We still made the same RESTful requests. We made a request to a booked index, but instead of getting an HTML page back with all the books in it, it just gave us back the raw data. It just responded with an array of JSON objects for every book. That's what we're going to build. So we're going to build, again, same 7 RESTful routes. It's going to be built in exactly the same way. The only difference is instead of sending them back an HTML page, we'll just send them back the raw data that we've got from our database after we've turned it into instances. Sound good? Cool, okay. So again, if I do that --API flag, I'm telling Rails, hi, just to let you know, this project is going to be an API. So Rails is going to do some default configuration for me to have it set up to be an API. If we take a look at what it's made for us, we can see some of the changes already. Look, let me move into blog first so I don't forget. Cool. Okay, so we can see we've still got our controllers folder and stuff, but you can see now application controller, it's no longer inheriting from like Rails' base controller. It's inheriting from a different controller. It's inheriting from the API version of Action Controller. So it's just little things like that. There's less files. There's some different configuration because it knows it's going to be an API. And it also means in a minute when we start generating our resources, when we start asking Rails, make me a controller, it will know that controller is supposed to be a API. It's supposed to return with raw data rather than, what do you call it? HTML. Cool, okay, first of all, we're gonna make our model and all our migrations and stuff. How do I make a model with Rails? Yeah, Rails G model. This is a blog. We're going to make a model. We'll make a posts resource. So I'm going to make a model for a post. Post is going to have a title and a body, both strings. We'll generate that. Again, that's going to make my class and all my migrations. So once that's finished, I'll just run those migrations. I'll migrate that to my database. Cool, looks good. And I'm just going to quickly make some seed data for posts. I'll just make a few posts. I think I used that joke already, but fuck it.
Oh, that's enough.
You gotta call all twos Electric Boogaloo. That's the sequel rule.
You know me.
Yeah. I'm gonna go for real movie trilogies.
Yeah. And uses like 1,000.
I love Hollywood. Cool. Okay. So we'll see that. Also, we should now have some posts. Cool. Okay. We're now gonna. Oh, I should have just scaffolded this. Really, that would have been a lot easier. Yeah. You know what? Let's scaffold instead. You might not have seen this before, so this is actually good. You can always do Rails delete, or you can do Rails D to if you've generated a resource that you go, oh, actually that's not what I want. You can use Rails D to get rid of it. Always do that rather than just, let's say you've generated the wrong controller. If you just delete the controller file, Rails will have made loads of other files as well. So if you screw up generating a resource, don't just try and delete because there'll be other things. Make sure you use the Rails D. So I'm going to say Rails D model post. So that's going to get rid of, again, you can see it's not only going to get rid of the class, it's going to get rid of the migrate. It's going to get rid of everything it generated. And now I can just do it again. So now I'll say Rails G scaffold post title string, body string, and the scaffold will obviously make my model and my controllers and my, again, it's an API, so it's not made views for us, right? Because when we don't have any views, we don't have HTML, we'll see what it does instead. Right now, let me just migrate and seed my database again. Oh, what's the problem? Oh yeah, I need to drop my database. So I need to remigrate over again. Actually, I don't need to remigrate because the migration is just the same probably. I'm going to drop and recreate my database just in case. So I'm going to do rate db drop, rate db create, db migrate, db seed, do it all in one line. Because I'm a bad boy. Yeah, you can do all that in one line like that. It's pretty cool. Okay. So let's look at the controller it's made. Again, models and migrations, that's going to look the same as before. Let's look at the controller. So we've got post controller. We can see, again, it's doing very similar things to what we've done. We're going to get all the posts. The show is using set post in order to find the specific post, as is the edit and the update and the destroy. Create is making a new one with the post params. We've got our post params to require and permit the relevant things. That's all the same. The only difference is, again, instead of rendering an HTML file or rendering an ERB template of an HTML file, we're rendering some JSON. Okay, so we're saying we can decide what the data type is we render. Here we say, I'm rendering some JSON. That JSON is this array of post instances from database. So let's start the server up and see what that looks like.
Does it do JSON by default?
Yeah. Again, because I've said it's an API, it's going to do JSON by default. Yeah, if I want, I can tell it to render some plain text. I can tell it to render some XML. I can render all sorts of data types. Not data types, formats. Yeah. Cool. Okay, let's start the server up, and we'll go to our posts index. So we'll say localhost 3000/posts, and there it is. We've got all of our posts. Okay, posts/1, that's our show, works fine, right? Obviously, we don't have the new or the edit because we have no need for them with an API, right? The only reason we had the new and the edit before was to give the user some way to actually make a post or a patch request. Now, our JavaScript will be making the post and patch requests directly. So there's no need for the new or the edit. We have the other 5 routes there. Any questions on that? No, cool. Okay. You'll notice, though, well, not notice. So remember, yeah, you may have noticed before that active record, if you create migrations of active records, they'll automatically have these created at and updated at attributes. So let's pretend that we've made this API and some people are using it. That's information that the user doesn't really need to see, right? If the user if we say, here's our API for books, you can use this API to do CRUD actions on books, and they get back information that says created at and updated at, that might confuse them. They might be like, why is that there? User doesn't need to see that. So what we can do, there also might be other information that maybe we want to be in our database, but we actively don't want our users to see. So we can actually control exactly what attributes we send back to the user. We're in complete control of what data we send back to them. So what I can do is, right now, I'm saying render JSON posts. I can specify what attributes of a post I want to be sent back. So it's going to be we can use these only or these except things that we saw in mod 2. Right? So I could say render posts except created at and updated at. Oh. So you'll see now, when I make the GET request to the index, I only get the ID, the title, and the body of each post. I'm not getting back created at and updated at because I've said do not include them with what we've sent back. So again, we can completely control at every route exactly what JSON we're sending back, and we can control what attributes. But right now, post.all, it's returning all of them. Show, it's returning one specific one. It finds the create. So again, these are the exact same conventions our JSON server followed. So with the create, it creates the new post. It checks if that was valid. If it was, it sends back the post we just created. Otherwise, we get some errors. The update, it tries to update it. If that's valid and been successful, again, it responds with the newly updated object. Otherwise, we send back some errors. The destroy, right now, that's not sending anything back. Anyone remember what was our JSON server sending back when we destroyed something?
An empty array.
Yeah, send back an empty object. So what we could do is we could go, okay, if we want to follow that, we can just say render JSON empty hash. Right, so again, it's pretty easy to set up an API in Rails.
Is an empty object also false?
In Java,
Yeah,
worth checking. I was going to say I wouldn't. Oh, an empty array is falsy.
Yeah.
It probably will be then. Yeah. Let's. Yeah. Wait. No. Hang on.
True.
No, it's true. Yeah. So, if. Yeah. No. Sorry. This does make. No, it doesn't make sense. Hang on. Yeah. Okay. That's true. Empty array is also true.
Oh, it's true. It is.
Cool. Yeah. Good. That for a minute I was having a meltdown there. Because yeah, JavaScript is all about objects. So an object should be true. Even if it has nothing in it, an object should be true. So that's good. Yeah. An array in JavaScript is actually also an object. Yeah. Everything's objects. So yeah, that's pretty cool. Cool. Okay. Anybody got any questions with what's happening here? No. So I mean, that's the main thing, to be honest. We're going to do something else in a second. That's basically this lecture. It's literally just use the API flag, scaffold it. It's pretty easy. The only thing what the labs will be around this is literally just figuring out how can I best. And again, you can see it's really easy to control. Again, exactly what attributes we send back. The only thing you're going to need to get a little bit of practice on is how do I, when you've got like relationships, like. How do I say, I want to include all the things that belong to this? Again, that's going to be easy. The labs will show you it'll be easier to do that in practice. So this is the main thing we need to see for the lecture. Yes, Tommy.
In Mod 2 they said then use scaffold. Is that different when you
I mean, honestly, I don't know if, I should probably find this out. I don't know if we're supposed to have like a campus-wide limit on when you use it. So if somebody else tells me different, I'll change from now on. But for now, my attitude is, once you're done with Mod 2, I don't care. You can scaffold if you want. As long as you make sure you understand what it's doing. I don't want people to use the scaffolder in Mod 2 because you need to get the practice of building every individual part. You need to make sure you understand what it's doing. And also, if you scaffold, this is actually my biggest fear about it, is if you scaffold, it gives you tons of code that you've got no idea what it's doing. But if we scaffold the API, there's actually not that much in here, and it's quite easy to understand what each part is doing. So I personally, I don't have a problem with you scaffolding. You're just, because this is not like a full app, it's just the back end for the, I don't have a problem with you scaffolding at this point, because it's not making that much for you. I don't know if there's a rule against that, but you can tell them I said it's fine. 1, 2. Cool, okay. Yeah, so I'm going to show you one other thing. So I'm about to induce an error that you may have seen already. So quickly, we've set up our Rails API now. Let's just test if we can talk to it with JavaScript. So I'm going to make a fetch to the index. So I'll say fetch HTTP localhost 3000 posts. And then I'll say then. I'm going to write this in the ES6 syntax because I want to do it quickly, but don't worry again. What I'm doing right now is exactly the same as what we've been doing. I'm just passing it functions. Yeah, okay, cool, that's good then. Yeah, cool. So, yeah, that is just, again, we'll talk about that more next week, but that is literally just shorthand for a function which takes this argument and returns this. Cool. So, response.json, and then the data we get from that. In fact, we can actually just say this. I can say console.log data. No, I've lied to you because it's an argument. Sorry, that was silly of me. It needs to know what data is. There we go, cool. So we do that, we get back our 3 posts. Make it to post/1, we get back the first post. So again, we won't bother doing the create and the update and the destroy, but it works exactly the same as what we've been doing to our JSON server. We're just using a proper Rails backend instead of the JSON server.
If you use HTTPS,
yeah.
do you get a cross thingy error?
That's a protocol error because
On the JSON
it is.
core error?
Yeah, that's what I'm about to show you. We'll talk about that. Yeah, cool. So I'm going to hop on over to Wikipedia, and here I'm going to run the fetch, and you'll see, as James has said, I'm going to, oh, sorry, it's because I still have the S on it. Yep, you'll see, as James said, we get this error. It's been blocked by cause policy. No access control allow origin. So cause cross origin read blocking. Blocked cross origin response. What do you think might be happening there? Based on the difference between this and this, and the name of the error.
So I'm trying to get from 2 different APIs, I guess.
Not necessarily APIs, but yeah, basically 2 different places. Yeah. So here, I can make the fetch request fine because this browser, this tab, it's localhost 3000. So right now, you can think of I am localhost 3000, and I'm talking to myself. I'm saying, can I give myself back this information, right? So the fetch request is coming from the same origin as where the server is. You want me to say?
You mean the console log?
What part? The console log is not really the important part. That's just, I've just put that there so we can see what we get back. My point is, I'm making a fetch to my server from the area where my server is running. So I'm like speaking to myself, which is fine. Bit weird, but whereas so here I'm on Wikipedia, I'm running on the client side, I'm running here, so you can think of this as when I'm making fetches from here, you can think of it as it's like Wikipedia. It's like I'm making the fetch from Wikipedia, right? So it's saying, hey, you're trying to access this server from a different place to where the server is running. I don't trust you. I'm going to block you off. So if you've seen this error yet, that's what's happening. It's saying you're trying to access a server that's not running in the same space. what we can do is we can control exactly where we allow fetches to come from. So if you look in the gem file, because I used the API flag, it automatically made this line here. You see it says use rack cause for handling cross-origin resource sharing. So this is how we can allow that to happen. So we're going to uncomment this rack cause gem, and I'm going to bundle. So I'll get it. Cool. And then in config, initializers, there's a file called cause.rb. I'm going to comment out this code, and this will allow me to tell it, so I can control here exactly where I allow fetch requests, not necessarily fetch, but you know, so like, you see it said Ajax, that's what I was talking about. Asynchronous requests via JavaScript, basically. I'm going to allow them to come from, right now, just this domain, and right now I'm going to allow them to touch any resource. So I could specify, if I wanted, I could say they can only access the post resource. And I could say they're only allowed to do get requests, or they're only allowed to touch this route. Right? So we can control exactly what we allow. So after like, you'll probably allow them to make gets and maybe post them, but maybe you won't let them delete. Maybe like you go, okay, we don't want people just sending delete requests to us from anywhere. We'll be a bit more control about that. So we can control exactly where we allow them to come from and what we allow them to do. For now, I'm going to leave resource as the asterisk. That's our wildcard character, right? So just like in SQL, this means everything, because it matches anything. So I'm going to allow them to access any resource with any headers and use any methods. And I'm gonna also put the asterisk here in origin, so that says I'm allowing it to come from anywhere. So now, if we bring our server back up, if I now try and make the fetch from Wikipedia, it goes through fine. Because I'm saying, hey, doesn't matter where the asynchronous JavaScript request is coming from, I don't care, let it go through. Now obviously, when you've got a real app that's in production, you would never want to do this. You would never want to say, yeah, just let anywhere make requests to us and let them do anything, that's fine, because you know, people hack your stuff. I mean, that's not even hacking really, it's just exploiting you being a dickhead. But I mean, I guess that's what hacking is as well, really. Most of the time, it's exploiting people being stupid. So, yeah, obviously for real, you probably wouldn't want that, but whilst you're developing, this is fine, because again, as long as you've not hosted this online somewhere, as long as you've not deployed this to an online server, as long as your server is only running on localhost, it's just running on your computer, then yeah, you're fine. Nowhere else is going to be able to make requests to it anyway, so you'll be fine. So if you get that cause error, I mean, you shouldn't necessarily get it as long as you're just making requests here, but if you do get it, uncomment that and bundle it, uncomment this and change origins to an asterisk so that you can make fetch requests from anywhere.
When you're making the fetch request from Wikipedia,
Mm-hmm.
are you getting, where is that request coming from?
It's still coming from, obviously it's still coming from my laptop. It's not like I've made it from Wikipedia servers. It's still coming from my laptop, but when it comes, let me see if I can look in the network. Let me see if I can see it here. I don't think it shows you. No, it doesn't. That's annoying. There'll be somewhere in like one of these tabs or something that will say where it's coming from. But basically, yeah, when a HTTP request is made, it includes the origin that it came from. So yeah, it's not like we're making it from Wikipedia servers, we're making it from our computer, but it would include in the headers, it would say the origin was wikipedia.org. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Cool. So we can specify here, again, which origins we allow it to come from. So by default, if the origin is local hosts, that's going to be absolutely fine. But if the origin is somewhere else, then yeah.
If you edit your request, can you change where the origin is apparently coming from?
My answer is I don't know, but it must The answer must be no, not really, because otherwise people would just do it. But there will be a way to, obviously you can spoof where you're coming from, but I assume, I don't know how they identify the origin, to be honest. It's worth looking into. I should probably look into it as well. But yeah, I don't know how they do it. Yeah. Any other questions? That's basically it, to be honest. There's really not much more to say. We good?
Thank you.
Cool, no problem.